rabble-rousing Rich Bergeron.
And Psychic Tom has it all, as the anchor man.
Yeah, and Tony conveniently is at an event tonight, and it's going to be a mostly combat sports night more than boxing. So we're going to probably talk some bare knuckle boxing. We have a special guest, Sean Wheelock. He's going to be on in about 28 minutes here. And the last time we had him on, I had to listen to it again because I was wondering how many questions I asked myself. Turned out to be maybe 3 or 4, I think. I don't know, but I didn't really count. I just was fascinated, though, by the back and forth between the two of you guys, because you really have followed mixed martial arts since the days of the very first UFC, and I've only watched it on documentaries and clips, you know. So, like, you two had just a fantastic conversation. And it was less of an interview and more of just like a jam session for two guys who have watched the sport grow up. So I'm looking forward to getting into that mix again and maybe butting my head in a little bit more and talking about the fighter pay issue, which translates well into him transitioning from Bellator mixed martial arts commentary to now doing that big circuit of the bare knuckle fights, the triad combat, and just a variety of things. But and then it's just convenient we're coming off a huge weekend of MMA to the point where I'm probably not even going to talk about the PFL fights because there's not any big names. But we had a Bellator card. One of my favorite knockouts of all time happened on that one with a kick to the chest of a fighter. So we're going to cover a lot here in a few minutes before we get him on. We had a big boxing match over the weekend. I didn't get to see any of that, but Amir Khan getting beat by Kell Brook. They say Kell was pretty masterful and just got the job done across the board and took care of business, basically. And Amir Khan
he just locked him down.
Pretty close to retirement.
And that's pretty much the story of the fight. Brook just locked him down. And Khan had turned. I mean, he tried to outslick him and get some movement going, but, it was just by after the third round you kind of knew it was going.
And the other big name fight of the week was Jamie Manguia beating Demetrius Ballard. I don't know much about that one, didn't get to see it, but, it was a pretty eventful weekend. A lot of different fights all over the world, but so like I said, last week there's a slow month, really, for big names. This weekend, Gary Antoine Russell versus Victor Postal. That's one of the big ones. And we'll get into that. But on the front page of BoxRec, we've got 4 fights for this weekend. Josh Taylor versus Jack Catterall. Jerwin and Sejas versus Fernando Martinez. The Gary Antoine Russell fight I just mentioned. And Chris Colbert versus Hector Luis Garcia. We'll get into records and all that stuff in a minute. But, I'm just looking down the schedule, and not a lot of household names on that schedule going up to mid-March. And one of our next big scheduled guests, there's going to be 2 guests actually on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. Got James Hagler coming on, and Freddie Roach's nephew, Ryan Roach. So I'm looking forward to that one too. But let's get into the MMA quick. We'll circle back to the boxing. As the redhead likes to say, who does Joe Biden's news reports, press secretary thing. We'll circle back.
Yeah.
UFC
Let's
fight
not
night.
get on that topic.
Yeah. Ukraine is burning, so let's just started that today. Anyway, Jamal Hill beating Johnny Walker in the main event of UFC Fight Night 201. It was a disaster lineup pick for me. I did not analyze any of these fights correctly. I thought Johnny Walker, despite all his recent losses, was going to get it all together, and he had the reach and the ability. And the first part of the fight, it looked like he did, but Jamal Hill just showed his explosive knockout power and just absolutely wipes out Johnny Walker with a glancing blow first. It was
Yeah,
like
that
one of
was
ricochet shots where it was just, when you turn a punch around, like they show you in the drills, and it just chips off somebody's skull. Sometimes that is more damaging than if it lands flush and you follow through.
Yeah, and you talk about a knockout.
Well,
there's knockouts, back. And then there's knockouts.
Like an oak
tree. KTFO. I mean knockouts. Bang.
It reminded me of work, like a tree falling over. The day job. Anyway.
And I think this was just devastating for Walker because he lost 3 out of the past 4, and the consensus was that your career is on the line.
Yeah.
And when first round, I don't know if he has any fights left on his contract. I would expect him to be good.
I think that fight is more of a product of the put on a show environment. Jamal Hill's a young up-and-comer. He's only got 11 fights. And Johnny Walker's been around, but he's lost a lot, and he's got to absolutely prove himself and put on a show to win, but at the same time, he has to fight smart because he cannot lose. And then Jamal Hill, he's only got the 1 loss, and he's knocking everybody out, even though most of it's in lower leagues, and he has to put on a show to really move up the ranks and get Dana White's attention on this one. So he did just that.
Well, he sure did the job.
He did just that.
Yeah.
Man, it's just special kind of power, like when you can turn a punch around like that, and not even hit the guy.
Very technical. Yeah, and he had a very technical approach. I like that about him.
Yeah, very calm.
Didn't waste much energy.
Confident, and Walker obviously had to be going in there knowing, another loss is going to really be bad on my record. And it was, sometimes
just
it's all in the head. But I liked what he was doing early. He was doing the leg kicks. He was fighting his distance. But then it was just sometimes distance and reach allows the guy to duck under something and just explode up. Kind of like Rocky would come down from the crouch and just pop up and hit somebody right in the face and knock them out with just a quick right hand. And I think that's pretty much what happened there. Jamal Hill just short hook, just boom, right off the skull, and then finished it right off. And just the way he fell, Johnny Walker, it sort of seemed to me like this is a guy whose button has been pushed a few too many times, and it's soft there, like a baby that gets dropped a few too many times as a child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's just destruction of that area. Like too many times, the button has been pushed, the temple has gone punched in. And so maybe that's going to be the problem that has to be fixed. Whether it's defense, so he keeps his hands up at all times to prevent that, or I don't know what it is. Or, maybe he shouldn't fight again. I don't know, but man, that's a tough road for him. So I picked him. I thought he was going to turn around, and I believed in him, but definitely. Some guys, they look like all the promise in the world, but then you put them in with the Lions and they get eaten. Fortunately, the life he's dealing with right now. Another guy I underestimated.
And he was undefeated, and I remember when he won that fight, and then celebrating.
Yeah,
he
injured himself.
You remember that one?
Doing a flop, like when they do in soccer, they score, they do some stupid stuff where they slide all around.
Yeah, not a good omen. No. I look back on that now, and it's been all downhill since.
Yeah, I remember that. That's pretty dumb. Anyway, we got to take it easy on Johnny Walker because he's been the target of many memes. There was a story about how many memes went around about his knockout. So unfortunately, that's the downside of boxing. You got to deal with internet trolls. And, it's not just the loss physically; it's the mental shit. So sometimes, I hate to make fun of a guy when he's been through all that crap. But hey, that's kind of what you sign on for too. So get used to it. But the co-main event was great. It was a catch weight. Turned out to be 195 pounds. Kyle Daukaus did not need much time, but he needed every second but one in the first round to get a Brabo choke over Jamie Pickett. And I had Pickett on just about every card. I didn't think that Kyle was going to pull it off.
Down to the last second. Yeah.
And he did.
Down to the last second.
And then a useless pick to win was Parker Porter. You know, heavyweight, you think it's going to be a knockout. And Alan Badeau had a very slow start. He got a little bit feisty in the mid-second and then came back full strong in the third and acted like he could win, but Parker just edged it out, really. And it was such a pathetic score for a win. It really didn't help my card on FanDuel. But one thing I did get right, I was psychic on Jim Miller. I had felt the vibe on Jim Miller. The guy that he was fighting had virtually no experience, and Jim got another TKO and earning the A10 nickname with the dismantling of Nicholas Mata. TKO in the second round, 1 minute and 58 seconds in. And the one that I said, this is definitely going to be a knockout, guess what? Split decision. No good either way. Joaquin Buckley, I believe I had him in the MVP spot. He did get the win, but Abdul Razak Hassan was on two of my other cards that I put together. And, did not work out well. And then the upset of the night would have to be David Onama taking out Gabriel Benitez by knockout in the first round. Gabriel just punched himself out, literally, like just went in there and unloaded, and looked like Onama was pretty much out of there. He's on his way, and then Onama just put the pedal to the metal and turned it right around. Just absolutely shifted gears and changed the whole focus of the fight, and put together like a 15-punch combination to finish it. It was just beautiful. And made me wish I had him. I don't know how much he cost, but I bet you it was between like $8 and $10, which is the $8 and $10, which is like the low range of the FanDuel guys. And then the other big upset was the $20 girl at the top of the range lost to a $9 or $8 girl, and Stephanie Egger by another submission finish, armbar, and just basically made it look easy. I mean, she just waited in there, got close, and got into a wrestling match, and then boom, armbar, done. 3 minutes and 44 seconds into the first. And then Chaz Skelly, I did have him right on a couple cards, helped me out, helped it look good early. He beat Mark Striegel by TKO at the end, or the middle of the second, 2 minutes and 1 second in. And then Diana Belbita, she thought she did enough to win. I saw her on social media talking about it. But Gloria DePaula beat her. Definitely not one of my good choices there. I definitely thought she was going to win that one on my analysis, but sometimes you can't pick these things. Chad Anleger, I believe I had him on all three of my picked cards. That helped because he was the threes are wild guy. He got a TKO in the third, 3 minutes and 33 seconds in. Chad Anleger, bantamweight too. This doesn't always happen when lighter guys get those knockouts, but I had a good feeling about him. Also, one of my cards had Jonathan Pierce in the main MVP slot. Thought he was going to be a little bit more dynamic, but he got a nice decision, unanimous decision over Christian Rodriguez in the second fight of the night. And then Mario Batista, I did not have faith in him. I picked his opponent on one card, but he was one of the ones you had to have. You had to have all the TKO knockouts, and then you had to have him. So he must have had a lot of significant strikes in that first fight of the night, and he beat Jake Perrin, who I analyzed was going to win by decision, but no, went the other way. That's it for that one. We got an interesting story about one of the fighters from Bellator last week, Gracie versus Storley. Adam Piccolati, suspended now by the Association of Boxing Commissions after posting a weight-cutting video that was deemed unnecessarily dangerous. And he just beat Georgi Karkanian via UD at Bellator 274 in a lightweight fight. He posted a video on social media, it's since been deleted, of himself crawling out of a portable sauna and vomiting on a towel. He added in the post that he continued to throw up 20 plus times throughout the night. So yeah, suspended 4 to 6 months and must receive clearance from a nephrologist, a doctor who treats conditions involving the kidneys, before he can return to active competition.
So he was filming this.
I guess so. Vomiting into a towel.
Boy, no good comes out of social media for that kind of stuff.
No.
Wow, and I wonder how much weight he had to lose.
20 times puking like that. It must have been a lot. But yeah, Gracie versus Storley. I didn't get to watch it all. I recorded it, because I had been watching the UFC. I was in a bad mood. It's like, I don't even want to watch any more fighting. But, I had to tune in from every now and then. And so I changed it just in time to see the start of the Andrei Koreshkov fight, which was the co-main event. And he hit Chance recounter with a spinning back kick to the upper ribs, like right under the armpit. And it just, I don't know whether he intended to go there or what, but it just landed perfectly. He must have broken a rib. Because Chance just went down, put his hand up by the ribs, and took a few more punches to the face, and it was over. 38 seconds. Brutal, but brilliant at the same time. And then Adam Piccolati, like we said, was a unanimous decision win over Georgie Karakanian. Brennan Ward beat Brandon Bell by TKO 32 seconds into the second round. Davion Franklin over Saeed Salma by split decision. Nick Brown over Mando Mallow by TKO 2 minutes and 20 seconds into the second round. And then the main event was Logan Storley beating Neiman Gracie. He goes to 14-1. Gracie falls to 11-4. It was a unanimous decision, so all 5 rounds in the main event. I will definitely have to catch up on that. I need to watch it though. And then the guy on short notice taking on the killer, Islam Makhachev this weekend at a catch weight of 160 pounds. Bobby Green stepping in at 29-12 with 1 draw. We got the tactician versus the knockout artist. So, is this going to be a Styles make fights deal, Tom, or are we going to have just 5-round war? Or just is the technical going to shine too, or is Islam Makhachev going to do what he does? What do you think?
I like technique. I don't know. That's what's coming to me.
I don't know. I think Bobby's got a little too cocky this time. He's fighting on short notice. Had a long fight last time. And, he always fights cocky. He likes to keep his hands down by his chest. He likes to move his head rather than put his hands up for defense. So I think, honestly, I root for Bobby Green. I'd love to see him stick it to Islam Makhachev. Not because I don't like the guy, but just because, nobody's really pushed him. I want to see somebody push him. But all that means, I think, looking at the two of their records and their styles, is Bobby's going to last a little bit longer than some of Islam's former victims. This is the way I would.
Yeah. So.
I think third round. That's the longest it'll take. I think Islam will figure it out, connect somewhere, and Bobby's going to pay for that lack of respect for him to the point where he comes in on short notice and he's going to do what he does and not defend his face. Just try to get away with, some quick head movement. But Islam's just going to swarm him. Totally swarm him. And so I got my money on Islam. I could be wrong, but it's just a feeling. We got middleweights in the
I would agree.
event. That's pretty interesting too. Not a big name in Wellington Turman, but he's had some crazy fights. 17-5 is his record. Misha Sertunov, who is 15-7. That's gonna be a good one. Then we got the female fight, already high up on the card. Ji Yun Kim and Priscilla Cachoeira. The 8th fight of the night, Armin Saryukin, 17-2, fighting Joel Alvarez, who is 19-2 at lightweight. That's gonna be a tough one to analyze. I got to put the computer on that one. Analyze those numbers. Tight record on paper though. Armin Petrosian at middleweight, 6-1, fighting Gregory Rodriguez, who's 11-3. The guy who described my entire strategy last week of picks, Zhu Rong. 18-4, fighting Ignacio Bahamondes, 12-4. In the sixth fight of the night, we got another female fight. In the fifth, 8-1, Josiane Nunez, fighting Ramona Pascual, who is 6-2 at featherweight. And we got lightweights, Terrence McKinney, 11-3, fighting Faris Ziam, who is 12-3. Alejandro Perez, 22-6-1. And hold on, Sean just said he's standing by. Okay. I'm just gonna text him real quick. So as I was saying, Alejandro Perez, 22-8-1, fighting Jonathan Martinez, 14-4 at featherweight. Ramiz Brahimaj, 9-4, fighting Michael Gilmore, 6-4. Sorry, at welterweight. Victor Altamirano, 10-1, fighting Carlos Hernandez, who is 7-1. The first fight of the night. And we got, we'll just go through the couple big ones at the top, and then we'll give Sean a call, I guess. He is eager to talk to his boy Tom. He wants to start early. Gegard Mousasi in the main event of the Bellator fights this weekend. He is 48-7-2, fighting an undefeated Austin Vanderford, who is 11-0. We got big female fight, featherweight in the co-main event. Leah McCourt, 6-1, fighting Sinead Kavanaugh, who is 7-5. We got Ciaran Clark in the fight just before the main event at featherweight. Abu Bakar Tunkara, probably butchering that one, but he is 7-2 at featherweight. It's a good fight. And then 10-1 Jose Sanchez versus 6-0 Kazan Mogamed Sharipov. For that one, ninth fight of the night, Brian Moore, 14-8, fighting Jornel Lugo, who is 7-0. Bantamweight, Brett Johns, 17-3, fighting Khurshid Kakarov, who is 8-0. A lot of experience on this fight card. That's a big one. Davey Gallant, 19-7-2, fighting Charlie Leary, 17-11-1. We got a Professional Fighters League PFL Challenger Series 2. The big one there is Michael Lilly, 7-6, fighting Jarrah Al-Salawi, who's 16-3. We got Delano Taylor, 7-1, fighting Mark Martin. This is at welterweight. That main event is at a 177-pound catchweight. We got Carlos Leo Miranda, 14-3, fighting Corey Cup, who is 9-4. And then Chris Mixon, 2-1, fighting Nathan Pierce, 2-2, at a 174-pound catchweight. All right. One more little story to talk about before we jump on Sean. A guy named Hunter Boone had a gruesome injury a few weeks ago. I was meaning to mention it last week. But the problem was with the cage. There was not enough padding on a certain area. I don't know whether there was a gate latch involved or what happened, but this guy got thrown into the cage and it basically sliced his head right open. And he blacked out and then came to. There was a lot of blood, and basically there was an issue with the cage. And the promotion is trying to say that they're not at fault, from what I read. But one of the officiators said it was the worst accident I've ever seen in 25 years of officiating.
Wow.
But they said the cage was inspected by the commission and the referee before and after the event, and nothing out of the ordinary was found. Somebody said it was an exposed metal bracket on the cage. Another person indicated that the padding simply wasn't strong enough to withstand the impact of Boone's head. So they're blaming it on Boone's head.
Yeah, it's not funny, but imagine punching that head. Wow.
This is a tough one. It's probably going to be a lawsuit. Probably going to be a lawsuit that they're
Was this a no contest?
I'm pretty sure, yeah. So, I don't know. I think there might be a reservation issue because it was on a Native American reservation, but I'm not sure. But if he doesn't get some compensation from the league or the television crew, whoever was the biggest pocket behind this thing, he's probably going to sue, I would think. Doesn't sound like a good deal if they're denying it, like, right after it happened. No excuse for that. You know, somebody getting cut from the cage like that. It's just vicious. Anyway, we have Sean Wheelock standing by. They call him the man behind the Mountain Dew. We have to get that story out of him. Okay, there he is. I feel like the announcer should have an announcer. Okay, that. Here is Sean Wheelock. Standing by.
Hello?
Sean, how's it going?
Hello? Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Hey, man, how are you?
Great.
I can.
All right. We've changed his nickname tonight. He used to be the Psychic. Tonight he's the Anchor Man, Tom Padgett.
How you doing, Sean?
Hey, Tom, how are you, man? Thanks for having me on the program.
Man, last time that show's been listened to a lot. The old history, UFC 1 glove Jimerson. A lot of stuff.
That's exactly right.
You know, like Rich was saying, we just had such a fun time talking, so we'll keep it a little more serious tonight, maybe. But, oh, God, that was a great time.
I appreciate that. We can talk UFC 1, we can talk the Great Art Davy, talk PKFC, talk whatever you like.
You know, and it's just exciting, and look at what you're doing now. And this could be the verge of something new here, too. You know, I've got a few suggestions, you know, but right now, hey, this is exciting as well. So let's just have some fun.
Most definitely. Yeah, absolutely. I'm having the time of my life at PKFC and Thriller, and now they come together, which is extremely cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, now, Sean, last time we talked, you were doing some work for Bellator. So, I mean, it's just worlds apart from where you are now, from what I've seen. You've been so busy doing all these events. And you've seen really an evolution, from what I can see, of what happens to fighters after they get out of the UFC. And in the case of this triad combat thing, you know, what happens when you throw boxers in a situation with MMA fighters. And you put a theme around it. So just kind of give us that perspective of like what you've seen in that different realm from what you've been used to.
Yeah, you know, it's amazing evolution. I was with Bellator for 5.5 years, so when we talked, when I was promoting my book, Is This Legal with Art Davy, which, by the way, is going to be made into a movie, which I'm happy to about and really proud to mention.
Awesome.
But yeah, I was in the midst of my Bellator run, and the industry continues to change. You know, promotions come, promotions go. I think that's the nature of it. First and foremost, I'm an advocate for fighters. So when fighters have more opportunity to get paid, to enter legitimate free agency with real choices, I'm all for that. And well, Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship is obviously open to more than just MMA fighters because it's not MMA, it's bare knuckle fighting. But more top-level MMA fighters than top-level boxers for whatever reason, and we can get into that, needed to be KFC. I mean, the card that I did last weekend, you had Chad Mendes, who had 3 different title fights, 2 full, 1 interim while he was in the UFC.
Right.
Who arguably is one of the biggest stars in all of combat sports right now, not even in his prime yet, still approaching his prime at 30 years old. Fighters continue to come in. Triad, which is a variation, you know, looking at the, as Triller said, leveling the playing field with boxers and MMA. And For some reason, going into that show, a lot of people were saying it was going to be a squash for the boxers, and just the opposite, actually. Team MMA won the 3 with the scoring system, 14 points to 11. It was a phenomenal night. So, as combat sports
except for Gigliotti.
To grow more
Gigliotti had a good time.
promotions.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but I had a little 6 degrees from separation from Gigliotti because I did work with a guy that used to just do the video, who's now promoting a little bit, who went down there with the Gigliotti kid, and he became sort of a meme after the fact. This funny, catchy name, that Fat Joe kept talking about and yelling out. That was funny, but it was an interesting format. I thought.
And no, Harry. I mean, a great fight against Jacob Thrall. Thank you. I really liked the format that was used. It was extremely fair. Again, the results show 4 wins to 3 for Team MMA. It did do, at least on that one small sample, that one card, left field. Yeah. And I've seen that play out over the last 4.5 years in bare knuckle. The clinch changes the game, right. Almost more so than if you allowing active clinch fighting changes the dynamic. That's why I think you've seen MMA fighters have more success than boxers when they're still in equal experience in bare knuckle. And I think largely that's what you saw play out. Take Mike Perry versus Michael Seals. I think Mike Perry would be the first person. He probably doesn't beat Michael Seals in boxing. Obviously, in MMA, that's a pretty easy win for Mike Perry. In Triad, it was a very close win for Mike Perry.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, and a great interview afterwards too.
Yeah, I'm a big Mike Perry. We talked about that on the Bare Knuckle broadcast on Knucklemania last week. That there's the perception of Mike Perry, and then there's the reality of Mike Perry. And the reality is that he is a very bright, very self-aware, very witty individual.
Good point. And a good point about the clinch. I remember Brady in one of his early books talked about the importance of the clinch, like a third dimension that we seldom think about. You're hearing MMA, well, there's round, but don't forget the clinch. So much goes on there, and this is a good point you said about that.
No, and I think that that's the differential. I mean, if you had allowed kicks without a clinch, I think Triad would have played out differently. Obviously, most boxers, you would have allowed a kick like Chris Algieri, who came out of kickboxing, but most high-level boxers really don't understand fundamentals of kicks. But every fighter knows how to fight in the clinch. Everyone knows how to kick, but there are obviously different levels of proficiency of kicks. My buddy Ben Askren, for instance, was not a great kicker. Yeah. But look at the clinch. Everyone in MMA knows how to fight in the clinch, and that's why it levels out. In Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship, there have been 4 legitimate major organization boxing world champions, and they've gone 1-3. And that really, to me, goes back to not fighting bare knuckle, but the fact that they're fighting with an active clinch.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, I got to ask a tough question. Do you own stock in Mountain Dew? What's the story behind that?
So the Mountain Dew. I'm hopelessly addicted to caffeine, and my caffeine delivery of choice is Diet Mountain Dew. I love it. In my real life, I'm a Mountain Dew person. Now, the difference between real life and being on television is, in real life, I try to limit my Diet Mountain Dew intake. Which, by the way, I try to limit it to the daytime hours. I'm not normally drinking it in the evening for obvious reasons, because it's a lot of caffeine.
Yeah.
Years, and I mean for years and years, I've gone to shows and commentated with the 2-liter of Diet Mountain Dew. And, people just see me on the air for years, but you have to think I might be at a venue 9 hours. So, yeah, it's still a lot of liquid to consume over 8 or 9 hours, but I'm drinking that over 8 or 9 hours. Or 3. But so a year, but I've done this for years, and people who've traveled with me internationally, be it China or Russia or Myanmar or Brazil, know that I will travel with Diet Mountain Dew in my checked luggage, because it's very difficult to find outside of the U.S. and Canada. And I'll have that drinking room temperature. It's great caffeine. It keeps my vocal cords moist. I just like having it. It's just part of my routine of being a fight commentator, live sports fight commentator.
So that's totally natural.
So a year ago in Knucklemania.
There's no arrangement with the company? You're not getting kickbacks for that? It's just totally free?
I'm getting to that. I have some breaking news for you. I'm getting to that. But so a year ago at BKFC Knucklemania, the Paige Van Zandt debut card for bare knuckle. After the show, we're off air and I'm finishing off the 2-liter. So Phil Lambert, the great photographer, has a shot. I'm off air. I'm still sitting at the commentary table, and I'm literally tipping out of a 2-liter the last ounces of fluid of my Diet Mountain Dew. Takes a photo, puts it on Instagram. Our matchmaker for bare knuckle, Nate Shook, says to me, "Man, that was a really cool photo. How did they Photoshop in that bottle?" I'm like, "Nate, what are you talking about, dude? How long have we worked together?" He was like, "What do you mean?" I said, "You did not know that I drink a 2-liter of Diet Mountain Dew on every show." I said, "No, never noticed." The very next week, I'm on UFC Fight Pass commentating Lion Fight Muay Thai. I take a photo of me with the Diet Mountain Dew, side joke for one person being Nate Shook, put it on Instagram. For whatever reason, it got a great response. So then I had to show the next week. I think I was doing a Roy Jones Jr. and do take a photo of that, get a great response. A year later, it's become my thing. About 2 weeks ago, Mountain Dew actually reaches out, want to sponsor me. They get my information, so there you go. It was never the intention. You know, in good pro wrestling parlance, it's always been a shoot.
Story, though.
I really drink it. Find me at any show. But if Mountain Dew wants to sponsor me, I am going to say thank you very much.
That is awesome.
Patience.
Well,
Thank you.
I think our biggest sponsor, as far as like name recognition, was the actual company that made Brondo from the movie. I don't know if you ever seen the movie. Cult classic.
I think that's very cool. Hey, look,
Brondo.
if anybody wants to sponsor me, I am happy for that.
It was just as green as Mountain Dew, too.
Very cool.
It's a real energy drink. But, yeah, that's a great story. Getting back to the real fight stuff, though, what do you think about this whole Francis Ngannou thing? We talked a little bit about fighter pay and why they're doing these other things outside of MMA, but now the biggest story seems to be Francis Ngannou wanting to lock out his contract and fight Tyson Fury, of all people, in a mixed rules boxing match with MMA gloves on. Is what they're describing it as. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, someone who got, aside from being a commentator, you know, I was appointed to the Kansas Athletic Commission in 2015. I'm the former chairman of the MMA Rules and Regs Committee. I'm not building my resume, just saying that I look at things also from a regulatory perspective. So when people start throwing out these types of fights, you always have to fall back to the commission. Now, if you try hard enough, you can get just about anything approved. I mean, look at the internet. You see some of the man versus woman. You see 2-on-1. You see 5-on-5.
Anything goes over there.
So there's a way to get just about anything approved. With that being said, you know, Fury versus Ngannou, yeah, maybe. Mixed rules, it gets to be a slipperier slope. The bigger issue is contractual. But, you know, everything changed for MMA fighters when they saw Mayweather-McGregor and they saw the money that Conor McGregor made. The reality is, whether MMA fans like it or not, and first and foremost, I'm an MMA, is that there's a lot more money for Francis Ngannou to be made if he boxes Deontay Wilder or Tyson Fury or does some type of mixed rule with than in MMA, whether that's against Brock Lesnar, if that's against John Jones, if that's in an open weight match against there's just more money there. McGregor will never touch the money in his career fighting in the UFC or fighting anyone in MMA that he did on. The only way he would ever touch that type of money again is if he did a similarly themed boxing match. Maybe against the Canelo Alvarez. Not that I'm making that match, but that would be... So, Francis Ngannou definitely took note of that. He's still under contract to the UFC. UFC has very restrictive contracts and enough to them, but those are the contracts the fighters sign. what happens to Ngannou is going to shape the industry. If he's able to get out of that contract, if he does a mega fight against Fury or Wilder, that changes the industry. If he's locked down to the UFC or he goes back to the UFC, the industry. I'm never going to say anything bad against the UFC because they're the gold standard and everything drives through. What issue with fans do, and I certainly understand the point, is the distribution of revenue. When you look at the NFL, for instance, contractually, it's 50% to the owners, 50% to the players. The salary cap is adjusted every year based on the previous year's revenue. The salary cap for the 2021 season will be different than in 2021. It will be up or down based on the revenue from this immediate past season. In the UFC, I've seen reports that the distribution to the fighters is as little as 7%.
Yeah.
And wow. I was talking to, as I do every day, to the great Art Davie, right, the founder of the UFC, who I wrote Is This Legal with. And what Art and I were saying is that this is probably the only sport now in the world where fans say the fighters are underpaid. No one's watching the NBA and saying, wow, these guys are underpaid. They're usually, why is the guy who gets 9 minutes a game making $18 million a season?
Exactly.
Or why is a quarterback who signed a $40 million contract now second string for my NFL team? But when you look at fighters in the UFC who are fighting at $18,000 and $18,000 a fight, fans take issue. When they look at Francis Ngannou getting reported $600,000. So in an era where fans are anything but towards athlete pay and fans are sympathetic towards UFC fighter athlete pay, that's something to look at. But believe me, it's not just the US. My former company, Bellator, there are kids fighting on the prelims for $1,500 and $1,500.
Wow.
PFL gives out the checks, which are cumulative, by the way. That's not $1 million to win that fight. I'm not sure if that's well known in the industry.
Right.
That's a rolling total $1 million. It's still a lot. But what about the kids who go 0-2 during that regular season?
Right.
They're not making tons of money. So industry, it's an underpay problem.
Right.
When you look at house shows, obviously, if you go to a house show and the main event is getting 2,000 and 2,000% of the tickets he or she sold, fair enough, because there's not a lot of revenue. But when you start looking at companies like Bellator, like One Championship, UFC, it's a legitimate question to ask on fighter pay. I'm really proud of the fact that the two main companies who I commentate for, BKFC, Triller, pay real money to real fighters. You saw the comments of Mike Perry after Triller. You saw the comments of Chad Mendes and Paige Van Zandt after BK. They're dispersing that revenue. You can't go broke. You can't give 90% of your revenue to fighter pay, or you're going to be like Affliction, who I commentated for last.
That's how I interviewed Donald Trump.
They
got one question in on the conference call.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there you go. Was ridiculously overpaying. They overpaid me as a commentator. Everything was overpaid, which was fun, but it only lasted 2 shows. It's finding as I see it, like an NFL model, where you're contractually saying X% goes back to the company and X% goes to the. That, I think, would make fans, it would certainly make fighters a lot happier.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I've been involved with a battle with the UFC and went all the way to bankruptcy court. I spent 6 years fighting it as my own attorney. And it's all, I put a whole website together on sciencesucks.com. But now I'm involved.
Very familiar.
Now I'm involved in a site called paythefighters.com. And it's ironic because I kind of got inspired a little bit by Jake Paul, but also by a guy named John Scully, who does gets all kinds of memorabilia and auctions it off, and then it goes right to struggling fighters like Wilfredo Benitez. There is one of the big ones. Wilfred Benitez, and the crazy thing is, I had an old Mike Tyson boxing glove that I got signed in 2011 when I was out there in Vegas dealing with the Zions thing. So I gave it to John, and he auctioned it on Facebook and set a record for his page. I think they ended up getting $2,500 for a glove I only paid $300 for, because it was for charity, you know. And Wilfred's in bad shape. Like, he's probably not long for this world, but I mean, it requires a lot to keep him in decent health, you know, and you know, good comfort. So,
and that's part, yeah, and you know, that's part of the industry that fans don't see.
Right.
Is that what will 10 years, 20 years, 30 years after these guys stop fighting, the vast majority of people don't think about that. You might think, oh yeah, I remember that guy from 20 years ago, but you don't think about the lives that these people have to live in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond.
Right. So, you know, you got guys like Jake LaMotta. He's still kicking, running around, and I mean, seems to have no issues with, you know, pugilistic dementia just destroying him. But then there's other people that it catches up to really fast, and there's just all kinds of stuff going on with these fighters, like just starting out, that need help. So I kind of got together with John.
Yeah, without a doubt. You know, if you
go ahead.
Go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
I got together with John. I did this project. It worked. And now I'm looking for a way to take it to the next level and make an interface where fighters can maybe sign up. And if somebody puts together a winning FanDuel or a DraftKings bet, or they put up a lineup and their MVP is a not well-known fighter and is not making a lot of money, they should be able to, with the sports gambling setup, I mean, it might be tough with regulations, but people should be able to tip a fighter. You know, he's an independent contractor for a reason, because they want to screw him. But there should be ways that we could work to pay them, you know, as consumers of all this. And we're making money off them, so why can't they get a little taste of that? But, I mean, there has to be a million ways we can think of to unite this community, since you can't have a real union. Never works, but to have more of like an association that stands up and does stuff for them and does events and charity auctions and works to give them a support system for situations like that. And I've started to look for like GoFundMes and stuff to highlight for people that have been in car accidents in the middle of training, and all sorts of things have happened. I mean, there's been fighters that have been killed in car accidents, just mowed down on the street. One guy from Bellator. You know, so you got to think his family was thinking of relying on him for his career. He was famous, and now they have nothing, and they're still mourning him. So there's just all kinds of ways.
Yeah, no, anything that you're doing, that anyone is doing that benefits fighters. You know, as I said at the top of this interview, you know, first and foremost, I'm an advocate for fighters, and anything that helps fighters. I think the average fan, not the hardcore, but the average fan would be shocked to learn how many active roster UFC and Bellator fighters have day jobs. Now, that day job might be being a full-time instructor at a gym, but the fact is they still have day jobs. They're still getting up and they're going to work, and they're using another means of income to support themselves and their families.
Right.
Like Major League Baseball back in the 60s.
That's exactly right.
70s.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to believe. And people hear that now. I mean, I was a kid back then, and, you know, you'd hear these kind of occupations these guys would do in the off-season. People have trouble believing that now. Now it's still going on. Very good point.
I mean, even fighters ranked in season internal top 15 rankings, a number of them have jobs: teachers, firefighters, police officers, private security. It's amazing. Construction. It's amazing how many of them have full-time jobs.
Yeah, it's crazy. Now, I got to ask, what do you think about this whole Jake Paul thing, where he has been really at Dana White's throat on the whole fighter pay issue, and then supposedly invested in Endeavor at the end of the whole thing? And now, I don't think he's actually been mentioned in a headline where he's been quoted on fighter pay for at least a week. But it's...
Yeah, Jake Paul has a huge platform. I met him when I was one of the commentators on Triller on his fight, his versus my buddy Ben Askren. Much different from what I thought, but I've been in this business long enough to know that you need to know the person, like we were talking about earlier. and not to hype around that.
Right.
Jake Paul has gone from being relatively unknown to one of the most famous people in the United States.
Unreal, isn't it?
Half years. He has a platform. It is. He has a platform. He has an agenda, and he's pushing it through. What the end result is remains to be seen. Certainly, I know he's done some good things for some people, such as Amanda Serrano, which I very much applaud.
Yeah, she's actually somebody we've interviewed like 3 or 4 times over the years, and interestingly enough, I think it was the last time. She had a little side beef with not Gina Carano. What's her name there? Ronda Rousey. Yeah, she wanted to make a point about Ronda Rousey the last time we got her on. It was kind of like, something that just Ronda had said about women boxers or something like that, and she unleashed. So it's an interesting.
Interesting. I like Amanda a lot. I like her a lot.
Situation with her and Jake Paul, and I love the idea of the $50,000 minimum per fight. I mean, it's a great idea. There's no reason the UFC can't do that. I just question, once anybody's involved financially with it, they usually go the company line, and that goes right down to the fighters. Sometimes they sign a big contract, they're usually gonna not talk out about fighter pay. Actually, Israel Adesanya has. He's just done that. Signed a new contract, but has talked a little bit about it. But most people don't. So for Jake to really come out and keep doing it and keep talking about it, it's going to be difficult for him now that he's invested. And it might be a small percentage that's never going to be decision-making, but he's got a bottom line attached to it. So it's going to be interesting to see if he really pushes it from now on.
Yeah, the whole issue without a doubt, no, it'll be extremely interesting. And, the difficulty in the industry is that even if the UFC is paying what people perceive to be too small of an amount, it beats the alternative in about 95% of the cases.
Right.
There are a small percentage of fighters who go to PFL or Bellator or one championship, but
for that $50,000 bonus, no matter what it is, performance of the night, submission of the night, whatever they're doing now. But and you remember they had to change it; they couldn't call it the knockout of the night bonus anymore. So it's been a different dynamic that's developed where now fighters are lobbying for it. They're in the post-fight interview. They got to mention, give me the bonus. So it shows you, how important $50,000 is. If you started giving that as a base pay, I think you'd get a lot more interest in the UFC at a feeder level.
Yeah, and something else that's been talked about in the industry is no-cut contracts. That a series is one of the reasons why in the UFC you see so many decisions and the number of finishes has continually gone down, is because oftentimes fighters feel the need to lose rather than the fight to try to win, and they're two very different philosophies.
Right.
That if you sign a 5-fight contract and you know that 0-2 probably sends you out of the promotion and you'll probably never make that type of money again as a professional fighter, maybe you're a little safe. Maybe you don't open up and fight to win and you're fighting not to lose. Whereas if you signed a 5-fight contract and it was a guaranteed 5-fight contract, it might change the dynamics.
Oh, definitely. I'm a big advocate of that whole put on a show thing as being a little toxic at times for the UFC. You got to put on a show to get up the ranks, to get advanced, to get that bonus. And so there's a lot of fighters that go out there taking too many risks. If they want a long career, they should fight smart. I mean, he's proud of it, but we had a guy on, Henry Corrales, who was talking about being happy that he was getting new teeth because he's such an aggressive fighter. And he puts his face out there. It's like, more power to him for being like crazy and psyched to fight that much. But, you still got to have defense, buddy. If you want a long career, you want to kind of shake the guy.
Without question.
But it happens a lot. These guys just are so encouraged to put themselves out there and put on a show and be exciting. And that means taking hits as well as giving them. And so it's just wild. It's a wild dynamic, and the UFC set the table for that. Unfortunately, it's just the way the Fertitta's race.
Again, right. The UFC drives, by and large, in the MMA world. There are a few countries that are exceptions. There are parts of Southeast Asia that are more in tune with one championship. There are parts of Central Asia that are more in tune with ACA, but by and large, the UFC sets the tone for the industry, from fighter pay to everything down.
All right. Now, getting back to what you do, just tell us a little bit about what your work life has been like. I'm surprised you have time to do this interview. I mean, you seem like you're doing every show there is to do.
So, yeah, I've been really fortunate. I've been fortunate throughout my career, and post Bellator, I wasn't sure what was going to happen. One thing I knew I wanted to do was commentate boxing. When I was at Bellator, I was exclusive combat sports wise. I couldn't commentate any other combat sport, and so my primary gigs are Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship and Triller, and of course, the news yesterday was announced that Triller purchased control AFC, which makes me extremely happy. I do a number of shows for UFC Fight Pass, including Fighting Chip, which is a really good Midwest MMA promotion out of Kansas City. I do a lot of shows on Fight TV. The thing I'm really proud of career, one of the few things I'm proud of in my career, is that I do Letway, Muay Thai, bare knuckle, boxing, MMA, grappling, and hybrids, anything in between. That, I think of myself as an MMA guy, but I'm really a fight guy. I'm a combat sports guy.
Right.
And it's athletic competition involving striking or grappling. I love being there. I love being able to commentate that. And I like the fact that I can feel confident commentating submission grappling or Letway or anything in between.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, and like one of the things that I was most amazed by when I went back and listened to the last interview that we did with you, I could barely get a word in edgewise, Tom, but was to state you never missed a beat. Like, it was just so natural flowing. Like, I can imagine that's just from a lifetime of working with a couple other people that you have to get their opinion in and you get your opinion in. I mean, like, we never ever stepped over each other if we could avoid it. And you guys just had a wonderful conversation of just nostalgic looking back at that first event. And, like, I hadn't seen it like Tom had seen it, so I couldn't have that perspective. Because I just saw it in, like, a couple documentaries, and I got into it, like, literally the first big fight I paid for on pay-per-view was Chuck Liddell versus Rampage Jackson. So, like, Tom brought something to it that I couldn't bring, and, I mean, he came right out of his shell, and it was great. It was
well, yeah, in those days, and I know Sean will back me up on this, it was just it was exciting. I mean, it was, to me, I mean, every one of these events was, it had a circus-like entertainment feel, but it also was an educational feel. Such a buzz. I mean, wow,
and,
what's happening?
You add to all the dynamic the fact that they were fighting multiple times in one night back then, and it seems impossible now. Seems impossible they could have done that.
Just the concept that, and I appreciate your kind words on that, and, just the concept of, literally, you weren't good at another technique, you didn't know another technique existed. For instance, at UFC 1, Ken Shamrock catches Pat Smith in a heel hook. Wasn't Pat Smith didn't know how to defend a heel hook, which he did not? He did not know that there was such a thing in the world as a heel hook. All he knew is that his knee hurt a lot. And if you recall, he sits up and tries to throw elbows. He has no idea. It's literally something that is happening to him. And as you'll recall, with Pat Smith, that was his hometown. He'd won the Sabaki Challenge, which was their fisted karate tournament every year in 3 times. The fans' reaction to Ken Shamrock tapping Pat Smith on a heel hook is to boo. They didn't know what they had seen.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, I equate it to, like, showing up at Wimbledon with a baseball bat and saying, who do I go? It was literally people flying in from different planets. They had no idea. Royce Gracie gets full mount on our Jason, unless he had had some schoolyard fights. He'd never been flat on his back with another man in that position. He had no idea. Everyone thought that their fight technique was the best, and everyone else's was horrible, and they were going to run through. the Gracies were the only ones who had any concept of cross-training through the Gracie Chapter. Everyone else just worried about what they did. If you were a judo player, you played judo. If you were a boxer, you boxed. That was the reality of it, and that was the real beauty of UFC 1 and all of the early UFCs.
Well, and then you remember after UFC 4, when Dan Severn was running the table, and he was, I would say, the first wrestler. Just he really had his tech, it was wrestling, and wrestling, his three techniques. But you remember, he was guillotined. He had to be told at the post-fight party that said, "Well, that was a guillotine shot," or guillotine. Oh, I'm sorry.
Right.
And he said, "Well, what's a triangle?" And then he says, "Why didn't someone tell me this 3 hours ago?"
Exactly. Yeah. He knew he was losing oxygen, and his neck and his carotid were getting compressed, but he didn't understand the mechanics of why.
Oh yeah.
This is a guy who was
you've done it.
an NCAA Wrestling All-American, Division I at Arizona State. He was an Olympic wrestling alternate, and he had no conceptual awareness of a triangle. That shows you how much the world has changed in under 30 years with fighting. Greg Jackson said it best. Greg Jackson said he's had a PhD when the rest of us were in kindergarten, and that's really what the knowledge base was like. You knew what you knew, and you didn't know anything else. And
I remember watching a local show.
There wasn't anything else.
And
otherworldly.
I bet like $5 on this kid that was a friend of a friend, and I thought he was going to win the fight, and he got armbarred. And so I'm drinking at the after party, and of course I go up to the kid that lost the fight, and I go, "I don't understand what's so painful about an armbar." So he goes, "Stick your finger out." And I stuck my index finger out straight, and he just bent it back real hard. Not enough to break it or anything, but and he goes, "Does that hurt?" And I go, "Yeah." Right. He's like, "That's what an armbar is like." So I forever understood that is painful and why people tap. But,
exactly.
And it's just such a common move. I mean, you roll into it, and I've noticed that it's like there's become a science behind like fooling somebody into thinking something else is coming, and then slipping either like a armbar submission or the rear naked choke, especially. Like you got to be like maybe punching somebody in the side of the head, get them to put their hand up, and then you slip the other arm in. I mean, it's just like a whole science behind distracting people to slip those submissions on. And because so many people know what they are now, it's so much harder to get them. So it makes it interesting. But,
the evolution of MMA is that, you might not be good at everything. You're aware of everything. You know how to do everything.
Right.
You know how to throw a head kick. You know how to put on a heel hook. You know how to hit a butterfly. You know how to throw a 1-2. And that just was not the reality in MMA 25 years ago.
Right. Awesome. Well, tell everybody where they can find you online, Sean. I know I found you on Facebook.
So I'm on Facebook, Instagram with all my photos. It's Sean Wheelock Official. I'm on Twitter at Sean Wheelock, and I definitely am a very responsive. People who direct message me, I will hit you back. I'm known to get people who reach out to me free fight tickets. I do that quite a bit, actually. I just did that last week at Knucklemania. So I always love talking to fight fans. So Facebook, it's Sean Wheelock. Twitter, Instagram, hit me up. If you're around where I'm coming, and always happy to meet people, always happy to talk fights. And a lot of people ask me about how they get into the business. I'm always happy to talk about.
Oh, Sean, one thing I wanted to mention for you. Back in the late 70s, I was just at the tail end of same time, and stumbled onto a few crazy books by this guy, J. Camp Thomas. I don't know if that name.
No, it does not.
Well, they're fairly entertaining books, and he had one about boxing's killer punches, and so I was, okay, let's take a look at this. And after I watched the first tryout, it brought back memories of that, because what his was he had the hammer punch, And then he had something called the baseball bat punch, where picture you're throwing a right hand, but then you stop and change the momentum and come back with the heel of your hand.
Interesting.
And then he was talking about if he'd have been training Foreman against Ali, he would have had Foreman come in with axe punches, hit Ali in the arms. And then his other was the guillotine punch. If someone's coming at you in a crash, you hit him in the back of the neck. Now, here's the problem with that. All that stuff's illegal in boxing.
Right.
Boxers in Queensbury would, if Foreman would have done that, he'd get a warning or two, and then he'd be disqualified. And as far as hammer punches, they are legal in MMA, but we see them on the ground more. We don't see them in the stand-up context as much as I would have thought early on, and maybe that's because of the times. But when I watched the first tryout, I said, I wonder if there's something to this because of the clinch. And your great introduction when you had the two fighters and you were explaining what's legal and what's not. Great job on that one.
Thank you.
Job. And that was kind of kicking some of this stuff into my head there too. So may I get you a link for some? Now these books are out of print now, and it's got fascinating stories in there. I don't know how true some of them are, but maybe I could send you a link just to get your brain going on that.
I would love that. I would love that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll forward the email address over to you, Tom. I think I got
I'm sorry, what?
I got his email address through Facebook, so if it's all right with you, Sean, I'll forward his.
Yeah.
Absolutely, okay. Please. No, anything with fight history technique, I would love to see that. No, that would be great. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah, because his books, well, he had Boxing's Dirty Tricks. He had. It was really how to be a super boxer. Now it's ass whipping boxer. And that one's free. You can find that one just to check it out too, because he's a very entertaining writer. And the guy was an old man even back then, so he was probably born around 1900. You know?
Wow.
But some of this stuff, the way he set this stuff up with his stories, and then he had some kind of funny pictures in there too. But I'm telling you, I was just after tryout, I'm there on the heavy bag trying to get the power because I always knew that baseball bat punch had power, but you could see it coming in a regular boxing situation, and you'd be disqualified. So this would be interesting. I'd like to see what you think about that.
Yeah, no, I would love to see that. I would love to see that. But guys, I so appreciate you having me on. Let's not wait another 6 years or 8 years or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to come on. It's a really entertaining show. Thank you.
Awesome.
Great questions.
We totally appreciate it.
We'll look forward to it.
We'll keep in touch for sure.
Thank you guys so much. I'm going to put the kids to bed now and play dad, and I appreciate you guys having me on.
Awesome.
Have a great night, bud.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Take care.
All right. Good night. And we have it. Sean Wheelock, the man behind the Mountain Dew. That was great. We got the whole story on that. And who knows? Maybe we'll get a royalty check for mentioning Mountain Dew so many times.
Sean's vocabulary.
Yeah.
Just like the way he said, almost unworldly.
Yeah.
Some of those UFC were early like that. I mean, stuff that we've seen that we had never seen. It was just such a good way to describe it.
Yeah, and if you're looking for the first interview we did, just to let our fans know, you can go to Blog Talk Radio, the FNU Combat Sports Show there. Just look for Sean Wheelock, and just a great conversation about his first big book there, writing about the first event, UFC 1, and how it all came together. And, just a fascinating story. And then, like tonight, I wanted it to be more about, like we talked about kind of in the middle of the conversation, where it was the evolution of his career, going from strictly MMA to doing everything under the sun that's not MMA, but close to it. So that was an interesting perspective, and I didn't expect to get that deep into the fighter pay thing, but that's great. He was open and honest about that whole situation. you know, and it's tough. Like, you seem to have that dilemma of, like, not wanting to say anything bad about the UFC because, I mean, it's brought him so much, you know, stuff to do in his life. So, I mean, it's tough to knock that. That's your history. That's what you grew up with. But at the same time, you know, you got to point out what you see. You got to call what you call. You know, call it what it is. And there's some very restrictive contracts these guys have.
And you know, he's been in the game because you mentioned that as you see these fighters, sometimes decades down the road, like Terry Daniels, who passed away, well, it was a year, maybe even 2 years ago, I guess. But, you know, I know how bad he was.
Yeah.
And it's just such, it's that part of it when the roar of the crowd calms down, there can be an ugly reality, an awful ugly reality, that's for sure.
Right.
And he really, you know, I've never thought of this before, but MMA owns sport that people wouldn't say they're overpaid.
Right.
You know that,
pretty much.
And well, you know, back in when I was training for heavy MMA back in the mid 2000s, yeah, I don't know hardly anyone that was full time back then. All those.
Yeah, the day job thing is pretty interesting too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
yeah, and then it started to change. But,
I think one of our targets is going to have to be Amanda Serrano because, I mean, she's got a little bit of history with us. She'll probably do an interview, and then from there we get to Jake Paul himself. Because I'd like to pick his brain on it and get him on the record. Not that it would be easy to get an interview with him now, because the dude's more famous than half of the fighters we try to get on the show. But
it would not be easy, but it would be fascinating.
It'd be great if we could get him on the call and you know, kind of press him on some of these things, because I really think, unfortunately, he's going to be a little bit more silent. Just think about it, like, you know. Even if you pick a fighter in a bet, you know, you're not going to trash talk that fighter. If you can have a chance to make a little bit of money off of him, you know, you want it to be all positive vibes. So he's going to find it hard now that he's fully invested to make public noise. He might make private noise. I mean, that might be his agenda. That even though he doesn't have a decision-making asset, he can pressure people because he has ownership, you know. And he can go out there and tell people he has ownership and make it look like, well, that's how he's doing it, you know, whether he's doing anything or not. But I really think that's going to be you know, whatever happens to Ngannou is going to shape the sport, is what. I couldn't tell because of the audio whether he said shake or shape. But I think he said shape.
Yeah.
Sean. But,
yeah.
Either way, it's going to do both.
Just another, you know, you can tell Sean is so at the top of his game on this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the insights he had tonight, it's like, yep, bang, right there. And, yeah, this will...
That Diet Mountain Dew is keeping him sharp. That's right. Mountain Dew people, call me. Call me. I'm backing you guys up. I will do the do for you guys. All right. I promised we would circle back to boxing, but I've looked at the boxing, and there's really not that anything great this weekend. And we're going to get a full report from Tony about his fights. I know his boy Sonny Conto is in action, the heavyweight from Philly, and a couple other guys tonight. But either he's going to do a little 10-minute report, freelance, or we'll talk to him next week. But that's a great show. We're going to promote the hell out of it. Trying to get into the Facebook Reels territory, so I might take a little clip and make like a reel, and just do like a little video promotion for the show with a couple of his quotes. But that's good stuff. You know, just a lot of knowledge, and I really, like I told him, one of the best parts about having a conversation with him is he's not like anybody else when it comes to, like, if there's a chance that he could step over you, like he takes the back seat right when you start talking. And it's like, we've had a lot of interview people that, not necessarily were bad interviews, but like, when they got to talking, you did not want to step in the middle. ever. You know, but he is just like so quick with that stuff, and like gives you your space, and then you want to give him your space back. So, I mean, it's just great back and forth dialogue. Which is what I love to see and hear, I should say. And yeah. So there you have it. There's the Anchorman Tom show.
Yes, sir. Yeah, make sure you get him that link. This would be interesting. See what he thinks about it, and because and the one thing I forgot to tell him, but like in the tryout thing, if you remember this, any time one of those like a hammer punch, for example,
Right.
That would be excitement, because we need that buzz.
Oh, like there's so many
different.
little things that have changed. Like I didn't really get a chance to talk to Sean about it because I wanted to get to like the juicy stuff. But like when we had Anthony Rumble Johnson on when he was still in the UFC years ago, I was talking about the trend to go away from ground fighting completely. They had such a put on a show mentality back then that it was like you have to do the takedown defense and be on the feet all the time, or the crowd wasn't into it, and the UFC wasn't interested in promoting you too much for main events or anything big. You know, you had to go for the knockout almost all the time, and Rumble was that type of fighter, so he thrived in that environment. And now it's become so much more nuanced. You've got a lot of decisions, you've got a lot of submissions, and it was an interesting perspective when he said that, you know, some guys are fighting not to lose. So you have the guy that goes in there not wanting nothing more than to put on a show, and then you have the guy that's on the opposite spectrum who just does not want to lose to, you know, get their contract screwed up. So those are the two poles, the bipolar situation. It's crazy,
Yeah.
but that's what it is. Interesting stuff. So we'll get that up on our Spreaker page, and we'll separate out just the interview for our Blog Talk Radio page, so we can do the evolution of an interview right there. And I'll put a link up to the first interview in the Spreaker description too, so people can see it there. And yeah, good stuff. And we'll be in touch with Mountain Dew.
Yes, sir.
We'll drink it if we get a big enough royalty check. Yeah.
Problem is, no one can see us drinking it.
Yeah.
That would be the problem.
Yeah. Well, we have to do the live show again. We did that for a minute. I forget what platform that was, but it's probably not around anymore. There were so many platforms back in the day that just disappeared. Thankfully, Blog Talk Radio stuck around, you know, with all our classics. But we had that. We had a bunch of them that got lost on a page that was just like, I don't even think I ever had to pay anything for it. It was just like free hosted stuff. And, yeah, it went away. But we got that good one. First time around with Sean, and the second one was pretty good. I mean, we talked about a lot of subjects, and we got a lot covered. And I definitely think that this movie being made out of his first book is going to be successful. You know, there's a lot of streaming services looking for big content now. It's kind of going away from movie theater movies, but the delivery is instant now. It's the problem and the joy of it, though. Because, you know, if you're a Netflix fan like me of some of these shows like Ozark, you know, you get the new season immediately, and you just want to binge it, you know. They don't draw it out for a week at a time, so you just want to binge it and just watch it all at once. It's so good. The problem with that is you run out of content. You run out of new content for people to see because it's just devouring. So I think that's where like Facebook is trying to get into these reels and, you know, 20-second clips, and so it's working on my girlfriend, that's for sure. It's working a little bit on me too, because I'll sit there on Facebook and watch those damn reels for like 20 minutes. But the only problem is like I'm starting to see that it's just get low quality. You know, it's not that great. You know, if they're trying to be funny, it's not funny enough, or if it's trying to be action stuff, it's really not that action enough. And it's like mostly car stuff, from what I see. And they take a lot of stuff from TikTok. It's got the TikTok label right on it, so they just recently opened it up to everybody can make money off Reels now. They had just as much as a week ago said that you had to have like 600,000 views and 10,000 followers on your page to be able to get into the Reels money. But I follow Mark Zuckerberg himself, and he put out the announcement just a couple days ago that now it's open to everybody on Facebook. So hopefully that quality of content will go up. But it's just another avenue, like to, just do these mini clips and make yourself famous and get stuff out for free. Make a viral attempt, basically, to get something cool out there. So I started out with like a stuff that's unrelated to Fight News Unlimited, but the most exciting thing I do that I could think of is the tree drops, So I get a couple good tree drop videos on there now. But I'm going to try to utilize it more to hype the show. Like episodes like this would be perfect for it because we got some really nice snippets we can use. Just throw that up on like a running video of maybe a couple of pictures of Sean Wheelock in action with his Mountain Dew. And we call up Mountain Dew. Say, if we get 10,000 hits on this video, would you give us a check? No. It's not all about the money, but it would be nice to make money doing this stuff because, it's like I got to pay the bills for the podcast pages. It's like $35 every month for Blog Talk Radio, and then on top of that, it's $20 a month or $24 a month for Spreaker. So it adds up, It's not chump change. And then, to be actually get paid to go and spending all the extra time scheduling people would be nice. A few bucks. So it's getting easier and easier to do that. You just gotta think viral. What's going to be viral? What's going to get everyday people excited about something? That's a niche area for us, but fighting is a good one. People fight in all kinds of different ways. Anyway, great show. We probably might not have a guest next week, but I know we have one the 17th of March, and we're going to work on Amanda Serrano. I try to get her on the show, and try to do that. Hey, you said you would remember us when you were champion. Maybe that will help.
Yeah.
Anyway, good show, and we'll chat next week, I guess. Thanks for stopping by.
All right, Chip. Sounds like a plan.
All right.
Let's enjoy the fights this weekend.
Good stuff.